Gordon Wasson was married to a Russian woman. George de Mohrenschildt was Russian. We're talking about white Russians. We're talking about anti-communist Russians. George de Mohrenschildt was one. Gordon Wasson's wife was another. They were married, I believe, in a Russian Orthodox church in London. The white Russians are the group that I'm familiar with in New York City because I was hanging out with them in the late 1960s, early 1970s. I knew them very well. And I heard all the stories, and I knew about their pro-Nazi point of view. And they, for them, it was a moral issue. You know, they hated communism. Communism was atheism. They were as anti-Semitic as the Nazis. They didn't care about that aspect of that. All they really wanted was to get Russia free of communism. So you have this strong... Yes?
I think in large part, aren't the Jewish bankers in charge of bankrolling the Bolshevik Revolution and that sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. You know, you can make a case for that. But bankers were bankrolling everybody. I mean, if we really want to look back to it, we can see that banks in the United States were bankrolling the Nazis. I mean, the famous trading with the enemy issue with the Bush, Harriman, Walker families.
Right, exactly.
It's just, you know, bankers don't care. Money is what matters. So to the white Russians, though, the Bolshevik Revolution was Jewish. To the white Russians, communism was Jewish. Karl Marx, of course, was Jewish. Karl Marx was a self-hating Jew. He was a Jew who tried to distance himself from Judaism, who wrote scathing articles on the Jewish problem and the Jewish question. You know, but Karl Marx was Jewish. So the assumption was that communism was a Jewish conspiracy or the creation of Judaism. And Freemasonry, let's not forget. Although the Freemasons didn't allow Jews, but that's another story. So you had the beginnings of a very good, very comprehensive conspiracy theory right there. And the white Russians were dead set, you know, in favor of the Nazis and against the communists, which then provided a network in the United States and throughout the rest of the world of pro-Nazi white Russians, which de Mohrenschildt was one. He was accused of being a Nazi by the OSS. He wanted to work with the OSS, and they refused to have him work for them because they believed he was a Nazi, although he protested that he was not. So I forgot where we're going with all this, but, you know, the Nazi...
well, you were discussing, I think, de Mohrenschildt possibly. Was that the direction you were going? Were you tying that back to him?
Yeah. Well,
and we're also discussing the Russian connections with Wasson and his wife, etc.
Sure. Okay. Well, that point I think we've made. Wasson was very much involved in the White Russian movement through his wife. I believe was a major force there. De Mohrenschildt also. He was introducing Oswald to white Russians in the Dallas area and to the Russian emigre community there.
Now, if Wasson was fighting for the White Russian movement, why was his brother a key player in the establishment of the State of Israel?
Well, Dmitri von Mohrenschildt and George de Mohrenschildt did not see eye to eye on these things. They were not on the same page.
Well, I'm talking about Thomas C. Wasson and R. Gordon Wasson.
Are we talking about the Wassons or the Mohrenschildts?
The Wassons.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, there's the two de Mohrenschildts who were on opposite sides of a lot of issues in the first place, George and Dmitri. And then you had the two Wassons. Again, I believe, from my own point of view, from studying what I've been studying over the years, that Israel and the creation of the State of Israel and Israel as a political entity is a pawn in a larger game. I think that we can read books on both sides of that issue, from John Loftus writing about the secret war against the Jews on the one side. We can read about the Bush family and the Walkers, the Harrimans. We can read about all different, about the Wassons, for instance, and about the de Mohrenschildts and the Israel lobby and all of this, and come away with this picture that these are robot wars. You know, the war between Israel and the Arab world is kind of a robot war, and I think Israel is cognizant of this. They know they're being used and manipulated. They know that they have value to Western interests based on where they are. there's an entire Christian fundamentalist evangelical movement supporting the state of Israel because of the concept of the third temple and the idea that the third temple has to be built. Jesus will come back, convert the Jews. If they're not converted, they're going to be killed, and all of this other stuff. So Israel has become something that you throw your own, you project your own desires onto. Whether it's pro-Israel, anti-Israel, or anything else, I believe that Israel itself is a pawn in a much larger game. And I think the Wassons saw it that way. I think a lot of American political people see it that way, that this is something that can be used or manipulated for various reasons, that you get various things out of. I mean, look at when we first got involved in the Afghanistan campaign, and we convinced Israeli arms dealers to help raise money and find Russian weapons to arm the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, who were their mortal enemies. You know, I mean, there's a point at which realpolitik takes over, and these ideological differences are really important to those of us who live apart from what these things are. But the manipulators of these situations don't have the same kind of ideological loyalties that we think they do.
Right, you know? and you know, the regular population sees things on an entirely different level. You know, it's just like religion and the esoteric and exoteric differences.
Sure. And when you're with the mainstream churches, you suddenly realize that, you know, these guys are not saintly. You know, these guys don't have your best interests at heart. They belong to a corporation, and they're going to defend the corporation, as we know from the pedophilia scandals, where the church would simply move pedophile priests from one parish to the other. I mean, right. They protect themselves. The organization will protect itself. Government protects itself. Corporations protect themselves. They lose their mission. They lose the goal that they had in mind. They had certain specific ideas. That's why the church was started. That's why corporations begin. Governments start. There's revolutions, and a new government comes into play. There's idealism at the beginning. But then give it a few years, and organizations will tend to protect themselves at the expense of their ideals. All of this stuff goes on, and we as people, we try not to believe it, you know. we resist it as much as possible.
And meanwhile, the corporation and the church and everything else and the country for that matter, wants your undying and devoted attention, and they'll stab you in the back as quickly as they can for the bottom line or for whatever it may be.
Well, they want your undying attention, and how do they get it? They get it by manipulating reality itself. You know, this brings us all the way back to my initial thesis, and that is that there is a manipulation of reality that takes place, and it takes place with the cooperation, witting or unwitting, of the media, of our religious organizations, of governments, et cetera, et cetera. There is a created reality. And people like Jackson, like C.D. Jackson, were experts in manipulating that reality. So was Hans Saba.
And Wasson.
And Wasson. I mean, look at what Wasson's interests was psilocybin, you know.
Right, I mean, and what he did, what I wrote in my book, The Holy Mushroom, what he did to John Allegro is a perfect example of all of this.
Exactly. Destroy the people who, you know, are not on board. They're not on the bus, as we used to say. You're either on the bus or off the bus, and the people like Wasson have perverted that message to say you're either, you know, with the establishment, and you're either with the group or you're not. If you're not with the group, it doesn't matter if you hold truth in your hand. You know, there's a big difference between facts and truth these days, unfortunately. You know, facts are one thing, and the truth is something else. The truth is consensus reality.